So last year, Whoopi Goldberg made some comments that were really controversial about Gen Z and millennials and their work ethic, basically saying that, Gen Z and millennials don't want to work as hard and that they can't get what they want if they only work 4 hours a day.
Listen, every generation comes and wants to do better than their parents did. Every generation. But I'm sorry, if you only want to work 4 hours, it's going to be harder for you to get a house. I feel for everybody that feels this, but I'm sorry. We busted our behinds. We had to bust our behinds because we didn't have the option of going back.
Crisis.
Listen, we had all kinds of stuff.
No, it's true. But the one thing I'd say is millennials are statistically the first generation that's likely to do worse off than their parents. That's
what they said to us as well. Every generation is told you're going to do worse than your parents. And you know what? People pick it up and they do what they do and they raise themselves. And this is what you got to do. It's called being a good citizen.
So these comments got major backlash. Whoopi got a lot of backlash for this, and a lot of people were accusing her of being tone deaf, not really understanding the landscape nowadays, how back in her day it was a lot easier to come up, and that she really should stay out of it. She's a millionaire. I really thought at the time this was really fascinating, and I think especially now it's the perfect time to bring up this topic, considering inflation and everything going on with the economy and how Gen Z millennials are really struggling to find the same success that our parents found. So I just wanted to get into it. Before we dive in, I just want to say welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Julia. And again, today's video is going to be on Gen Z, millennials, all the stuff going on with our work ethic, if we're actually lazy or just tired. I also want to draw attention to my second channel where I discuss things with my faith and lifestyle. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely hit subscribe. But without further ado, let's get into it. So again, Whoopi Goldberg's perspective is a perspective that I think a lot of elder boomers and Gen Xers hold, that kids nowadays just don't want to work as hard. And she's speaking about how a lot of the criticism or a lot of the challenges we're facing, she was told the exact same thing when she was young, and that there's nothing new under the sun. So it's kind of like we were told the same thing and we managed to make it work, so you guys can too. And a lot of people are saying, well, no, comparatively you guys had it much easier. So this conversation came from a segment on The View where they were discussing how people nowadays are having children later and later, and that people are not having children as early as they used to. And some people just don't want to have kids at all. And so that's what's sparked this whole debate of work ethic. So I wanted to detail some challenges facing Gen Z, and just to be mindful, I am not a financial analyst or an economist, so I'm not going to go super deep in that perspective, but I do want to just bring up some statistics that I found, as well as, again, just drawing from my personal experience and experiences of all of you that you guys have talked about online. So I may not be a financial analyst or an economist, but I can tell you about this vintage soft scoop bralette from Parade in Dusty Rose. Honestly, this is such a comfortable, comfy bralette. I don't really feel it on me. I've been working from home all morning and I haven't really felt it on me. I forget that it's even on, and I can wear it pretty much under anything, when I'm going to the gym, where I'm going out, anywhere. I can wear it underneath anything. So I highly recommend this bralette. And honestly, who doesn't like Dusty Rose? Who doesn't like this color? I don't know who you are if you don't like this color. I don't know. So if you want to get yourself a super soft, comfy bralette that feels like a cloud on your chest, then head to yourparade.com and use my code Julia50 for 50% off site-wide with no minimum purchase. And this is a limited time deal, so if you want to cop it, I would cop as soon as possible. It's worth it. I'm gonna tell you, it's worth it. So thank you so much, Parade, for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back to talking about Gen Z. So there's a lot of challenges facing Gen Z specifically, challenges such as rising housing costs, larger student loan balances, and more overall debt than previous generations. And according to the Washington Post, we're paying 31% more for housing than our counterparts did a decade ago, adjusting for inflation. And so 31% more for housing. I mean, right now, trying to get a house is wild. Trying to get a house feels like such a wild goose chase. I've had some friends that are going through the home buying process and how hard and arduous it was for them. And thankfully they were able to get houses, but it was not an easy process. It was not a cakewalk. It never really is a cakewalk, but it feels like nowadays, it feels like there's so many more barriers to entry. Spending on car insurance for people aged 16 to 24 more than doubled between 2012 and 2022. From the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, they stated that it's gone up more than double, which is insane. Health insurance spending for our age group is also up 46% after inflation. And by comparison, inflation adjusted earnings for the cohort have risen much less in the same period by only 26%, federal data shows. So things are going up constantly. So everything is going up. All the prices of all the things are going up, but then our actual wages are not increasing nearly as much. And so as the cost of living and as all these other expenses keep rising, your paycheck isn't getting fatter, so it's much harder to keep up. Average credit card interest rates have also reached an all-time high, nearing 22%. I also want to discuss that the stock market is taking a huge hit lately. I think about a week or 2 weeks ago, we had a huge shakeup in the stock market. There was markets crashing in Japan. The Nikkei index was falling as much as 12.4%. The Dow Jones closed down more than 1,000 points, and the Nasdaq dropped by 3.4%, and the S&P tanked by 3%. So that's pretty insane that, I remember seeing it on the news, and my dad's like, oh man, our 401ks, we got to check our 401ks. It's going to affect our 401k. And I'm like, oh crap, I got to check my 401k to make sure everything's all good. Clearly it's going to take a hit, and it really sucks. But, this is kind of the name of the economy. It's the name of the game. Things go up and down. It's not really anything to be super surprised by, but it is unnerving. It's also been really hard for Gen Zers to find work. And Gen Z is the first generation where recent college grads are more likely to be unemployed than the general population. But what's even sadder is that the market was processing the July jobs report as they do every month. And the US only added 114 new jobs in July, which was well below economists' expectations. So, that's been such a huge thing that it's so hard to find a job right now. And what I think is just so crazy is when I think of Gen Z, especially elder Gen Z, so I myself am elder Gen Z, I'm going to be 26 next month. And I remember at the time when COVID happened, I remember my professor telling me, she was like, you guys were set up to be in such a great economy. You guys were so set up to be in such a wonderful position. And then COVID happened and just freaking lit fire everywhere, and it's just so insane right now where it's in every single industry, it's so difficult to find work, and then especially if you're an entry level entering into the market, you're having to compete with people that have years of experience, and then probably more education credentials than you. So it's very, very difficult right now to find good work. So I also want to acknowledge the different attitudes of Gen Z. So I feel a big thing when it comes to this conversation of our work ethic is, understanding that not everyone is the same. We can't paint an entire generation with one brush. I definitely think that there are some characteristics that Gen Z holds that other generations don't have by and large. But, there are some people that don't really want to work. There are some people, admittedly, that are lazy. They don't want to get up. They don't want to actually do what they need to do. They will blame their situation and their circumstances all the time, and they never seem to actually get to a point where they want to do better for themselves. That's in every generation. That's just the truth. Every single generation has that crop of people, and Gen Z is no different. But I also don't think it's fair to paint Gen Z with one brush. So I just kind of want to talk a little more about just the differing attitudes within our generation. So, for example, I found a story on the Washington Post of a woman who started accumulating credit card debt a few years ago with impulse buys like clothing and makeup after pandemic restrictions lifted. And then things spiraled out of control when she needed to get some emergency dental work, and she had to max out one of her credit cards in order to pay for it. And she ended up racking over $8,000 in debt, and she's still working on paying all that down. So again, that's kind of what I'm saying before, that you will have people in a generation where, there's different money management skills, different work habit skills. I mean, I would argue that this is just poor money management. But in her defense, I will say that I think economists have said that a lot of people, once restrictions were lifted, spending increased a ton because, with the pandemic, we all lost out on a year of our life. A lot of people lost out on so much time, and it really forced Gen Z to have to stay home during, our prime years. These are our years where we want to, become adults and explore and do different things, and we're locked down. So it led a lot of people to kind of going crazy when the world reopened. So I'm not giving a justification for that kind of behavior, but just an explanation that, it's finally I'm free. I want to just enjoy myself, so I can't fully, blame someone for that, even though it may not have been the best way to handle their funds. I also feel differences in work attitudes just have to do with your background, your family background, the kind of people around you, the education you have, the access you have. All of that kind of changes your ambitions and what kind of angle you go in. If you grew up in a more well-off family or a really supportive family, you have more resources physically and mentally, or one or the other, to get yourself off the ground, whereas someone that doesn't have that kind of privilege really has to find their own way. I also believe mental health plays a huge factor in these struggles. I'm telling you right now, I'm not even gonna lie, like mental health, especially with work, has been something I've been really trying to re-navigate for myself. I work in tech, I'm a product designer. So, always having to manage tech burnout and making sure I don't burn out, I think that's a huge factor in struggles. A lot of people struggle with anxiety and depression, and Gen Z is honestly the most anxious and depressed generation. And, I think with that, that also makes it very hard. If you're struggling in your daily life, showing up to work, you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, minimally, that is a huge chunk of your life. And when you're struggling with mental health, it makes it even harder to do so. And I just feel like that's something that I think, especially from the pandemic, we really were like, oh no, we're not going to throw away our mental health just to slave ourselves to a corporation, just to slave ourselves to these companies that don't really care about us, that if we were to die tomorrow, they would replace our position the next day. And with me saying this, I know I'm probably going to get a comment where they're like, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I understand that I'm probably going to get a comment like that, but I really think what older generations need to do is give younger generations grace. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we were all young, trying to figure it out, trying to find ways to be financially secure, to, make it in a really horrible capitalist world. We're all trying our best. And I think grace needs to be given for us to navigate and for us to get on our feet, because eventually we will, eventually we will. I'm optimistic. So again, I want to talk again about Gen Z's work values. And so our values are very different than I feel like the previous generation. So from the research I had, and just from being in this generation and talking to people my age in the workforce, we are a lot more, I think, purpose driven in our work. We want to really create an impact and work on stuff that is meaningful and fulfilling, not something that's just soul sucking. Or if we do end up doing a soul sucking job, we do it for a short time as a means to an end, not for 40 something years, like how a lot of Americans do. And I also feel like Gen Z, growing up with technology, we grew up literally in the internet, like pretty much the internet was in a lot of our lives. I literally don't remember a time where I didn't have a computer in the house, type it on Mavis Beacon. That's how I learned how to type. And then I was surfing the web by like 5 years old on Nick Jr. in like 2003. I grew up with the internet. So I think with that adaptability with technology, I think we're just a lot more tech savvy, and we really kind of value like using technology wisely in our work and contributing that to our work-life balance. So again, like I said before, with Gen Z wanting to make an impact and doing meaningful work, 37% of Gen Zers say that they want meaningful work that's genuinely impactful, but financial security is also incredibly important as well. So money is so important to Gen Z that they're willing to make trade-offs on working from home. So that's 41%. 41% of Gen Z would prefer to not work from home in order to have more money, as well as spending time on hobbies. That's 37%. 34% would prefer to kind of abdicate their social life for more money, and 19% would abdicate their relationships for salary. They're also even more willing to trade off doing more exciting tasks at work in order to have a more stable salary. And this is based on EduBirdie data. So I think this could be because a lot of Gen Zers grew up during the Great Recession. And so we saw like our parents struggling. And for me, I remember my dad got laid off during the Great Recession, and I remember the impact that it made on our family. It took him 6 months to find another job, and I remember during that 6 months, it's like my parents had to constantly explain, like, we don't have it like we used to. Okay, we need to be more mindful. My parents were very big on saving, so we had a cushion, but my parents were like, just because we have a cushion doesn't mean we have to go crazy with it. We need to be conservative until your dad finds a new job. So I always grew up with that, and I think it definitely shaped how I viewed money and how I viewed financial security. And I think for a lot of us, we grew up in that time frame, and so we really want financial security. So again, like I said before, I really think it's unfair to call an entire generation lazy just because we don't want to be soul sucked. I just think it's important to acknowledge that things are a lot more difficult than it was back then. And I feel like, inflation is going to be a consistent conversation that we're dealing with. We're going to constantly talk about how it costs like freaking $10 for eggs, and I just think, it's a conversation that needs to continue happening. But I just think that the generation wars is just so stupid. And sometimes I even think just talking about us in terms of generations is dumb, but I also understand that how else are we going to get grouped together? You know what I'm saying? Like the desire to constantly group us by cohorts. But yeah, I basically just kind of wanted to get into kind of the different situations that Gen Z is struggling with, as well as sort of the different reasons behind these sorts of struggles. And I really feel like people need to be a bit more mindful. You know, we need to be a bit more mindful of what's going on right now. And, you know, it's difficult. So I hope you guys enjoyed my video. I hope you guys enjoyed my take on, is Gen Z lazy or just tired? I believe that we are just tired. We are not lazy. Yes, you have your lazy people, but that doesn't mean the whole generation is. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know kind of like about your situation and kind of your take on everything going on right now with the economy, with inflation, and kind of your own struggles. I'd love to read and, you know, have dialogue in the comments. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.